Welcome back to Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro. I'm Ryan.
Hey, and I'm Brian.
And this is the Bible Bistro.
I thought you say that I'm the Ryan half of Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro, and then I say, and I'm the Brian half of Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro.
Well, I used to when I did just.
Oh, we quit?
Well, no, it's when I pre-recorded the intro. But
Okay.
I'll do it for you now. I'm the Ryan half of Ryan and Brian,
And I'm the Brian half of Ryan and Brian. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't sound
and it
good.
just doesn't have the same feel to it.
Yeah. But you just told me something that's, we're finishing up season 1 and
No,
then,
hello, time warp. We're finishing season 2.
season 2, right? And that's what I meant. And then you gave me some insight into the next season. You're gonna have a little recorded intro.
Oh,
that sounds
we're
delightful.
going to the next level here, Brian.
Wow.
And I'm just going to record a video intro with because coffee mugs,
Level up, podcast level 3.
podcast level 3, season 3. Well, because we talked about one of our supporters they got a T-shirt instead of a coffee mug.
And they really wanted a coffee mug.
And they really wanted a coffee mug, and I called anyway. But anyway, we're getting coffee mugs. You and I are going to have a coffee mug, and we're going to send out that third coffee mug. But, and if you are listening to this and you're thinking, coffee mugs, how do I get one of these coffee mugs?
It's a Ryan and Brian Bible Bistro exclusive. I would call it exclusive.
Very exclusive coffee mug, and you can get that if you support us on Patreon.
Yep.
And if you're wondering, how do I do that? You can go to the website, thebiblebistro.com, and in the upper right hand corner you can click a little button up there that says support us, and you can become a monthly supporter of Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro, and you can earn a coffee cup. And not earn, you'll get a coffee cup. You can,
It's a
you can
gift.
get
It's a free gift.
Sticker. It's a free gift
It's
with your
like-
monthly subscription.
It's like God's grace.
Like God's grace, or a T-shirt. So there's options. So if you're enjoying the podcast and you'd like to support us, you too can get a coffee mug. I was going to hold up my coffee mug, but it says everyone is entitled to my own opinion, and you can't get that coffee mug.
sounds
That's
right.
just that's just my coffee.
And here's
mug.
my Green Bay Packers water cup.
Aaron Rodgers, not
They won
winning.
last night.
Oh boy,
Or yesterday
Well,
against the Bears. So
yes. Anyway, so here we are.
enough of that.
Enough of us talking about insanity and randomness. We're gonna continue our Advent series.
Yeah, it's Advent season.
It is Advent season, and so there's, this is a time we've talked about, like, a lot can happen, and we can sometimes lose a little bit of focus.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate this Advent series we've been on. We did one last year with through the Old Testament and the prophets, and this time we're going all the way through Isaiah.
Yep. Just,
And so
four passages. Uh-huh.
yeah, so because you've been preaching through Isaiah, so Brian, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking
We're
about
going to
today.
look at Isaiah 11. Of course, the second week of Advent, we're going to talk about peace today. You've been going through an Advent devotional too. You said you've really been enjoying.
Yeah, so I've been reading a book on Advent from Fleming Rutledge.
Okay.
She's an Episcopalian priest, so outside of our brotherhood of churches, but I wanted, it was getting good reviews, and so I picked it up, and it's really. It's been really, really good. What I appreciate about it is that she's making the point that Advent is all about the darkness. That Christ coming in the midst of darkness. That Advent starts in the dark.
There's the expectation. We're waiting. It's not yet. It's
we're
anticipating.
She really draws that application of just like the Israelite or the Jews were waiting for that this time when God this time when the Old Testament isn't, we don't have any of those scriptures, that they're waiting for the Messiah, in this darkness, that even though Christ has come, we're waiting in a dark world still for Christ to come again. And so like this Advent season is, as they were preparing for Christ, we're also preparing for Christ again and reminding us of that time that we're in. So anyway, so I've been reading that. It's called Advent, and it's by Fleming Rutledge. So I think it's a fantastic read if anyone's listening and might be interested in something like that.
Yeah, so we do this in thinking about expectation. Advent often, as I mentioned before, it's not only thinking back to the way, as you mentioned, the Israelites were waiting for this long period of time for the promised Messiah to come, but then also it's a way that we anticipate the return of Jesus and the way that things are going to be made right. So part of Advent is kind of recognizing you said the darkness. Another way to say that would be the brokenness around us, or the things that are not the way they're supposed to be. You know, that even though Messiah has come, even though we are followers of Jesus, we recognize that there are things that are still difficult. So today we're talking about peace, and when we think about peace, a lot of times peace is in the context of nations, and the passage we're going to look at in Isaiah 11 gives us some of that. We're going to take it a little bit further. Well, I don't know about further, but bringing it to bear on our own lives as well, not just in the big nation sense, but also on a personal level today. But I was thinking about, peace is one of the things that we want from our nation. It's one of the things I think peace is a good word for most people, right?
Right.
Almost everybody say, well, peace is something that I want. And in fact, you ask people, what's your wish this Christmas? Oh, peace on earth, and all the children of the world would hold hands and sing together in peace. That kind of thing, peace and harmony. Even if we don't have a real good grasp of what that means. And so when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, because of the way this chapter starts, it has to do with not only the nation, but also the leader of the nation. And of course, during the time of Isaiah, that would be the king.
Right.
You might remember he writes this is during the reign of King Ahaz, who was not a good king, who was not leading people.
Didn't have a good wife either.
Yeah. I think you're thinking about Ahab, but
sorry,
this is Ahaz.
Sorry.
That's fine. Ahaz. It's close. It's
a letter off.
But the king. So what do you think we look for in a good leader? And I'm not trying to get political with this, but what kind of things do we want in a leader, would you say?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, it is a loaded question. So,
are you as a national leader? A national leader.
Yeah.
One that is, gosh, this is loaded, man.
Well, I think you can talk in generalities here.
Are we talking about foreign relations or what?
Well, that's obviously part when, especially when it comes to peace, it has to do with, how they're going to lead the nation. Some people, I'll just give you some examples. Some people will talk about, we want a strong leader, somebody who's going to stand up. We might say we want a leader that has compassion for his people. We can see examples in the world right now. That's part of it. I wasn't just thinking about our own nation, but I was thinking overall. We can look around us, and I'll just, I'll mention a couple of world events right now that are going on. We have a war going on in Eastern Europe,
right,
and in Ukraine, and I think you want a leader who is compassionate for his people, and maybe compassionate for people in general. Think about people in other nations, and we're getting ready to, people have kept kind of, for a long time, they've been dreading this winter. Oh, if the war goes on into the winter, it's going to be a horrible situation and that kind of thing.
Right.
The other thing I'm thinking about is the protest. This last week, there were a week before last, there were protests in China. And, you think about the way that those were put down. They're protesting government policies, and there's a lack of freedom there to be able to express your viewpoint. It's that kind of thing, I guess, is what I'm looking for in generalities. Do you have anything to add to that? Those are some of the things that I think come across.
Yeah, obviously this is going to work its way back to peace, because that's what this is about. But I think it's one that's and I think in today's world, it's like not picking a fight almost.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
well,
that's what it's almost come down to. But it's, it's looking out for his own people.
Right.
And gosh, or her. Yes. Thank you. I'm just going to stop talking for the rest of the podcast.
No, you're doing fine. So, you talk about picking a fight. We use this term sometimes, hawks and doves, right? We have this kind of an idea. But so I guess I mentioned it for this reason. Ahaz is a descendant of David. That's the king during this period of time. And there is a desire to look back at David, because he was a king during Israel's a golden period in Israel's history, and obviously there are issues about David as well, and there would be things about him that we would not like as a king, I think, and there are mistakes that he made. But that's one of the things that chapter 11 of Isaiah is gonna show us here. I want you to read us just the first 3 verses here. Actually, I'll tell you what. Let me read the first verse, and I'll let you pick up after that.
Okay.
The first verse, and I just want you to see the symbolism here is the reason. We're just going to read verse 1 and talk about the symbolism. This is Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1. It says, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From the roots, a branch will bear fruit." So Jesse, of course, is the name of David's father. And so he is the one from whom this line of kings has really descended. And so this idea of the stump of Jesse is the idea. You know what a stump looks like if you've cut off a tree, and we use them in cartoons even a lot of times. It's funny in plays that are set in the woods, kids' plays. There's always a conveniently placed stump for people to sit on. But anyway, this idea of a tree that's been cut off. And that's kind of this idea that the line of David has come down, but it's been cut off. But then there's going to be the shoot that's going to come out. And you guys have seen this probably from the stump of a tree. A shoot will come out, and continue to grow and draw nourishment from those roots, even though it's a much smaller shoot than what you have. And this is looking forward to this idea of a king like David from this line of Jesse, who's going to continue in David's way after this line of kings, after this, dynasty, if you want to call it that, has been cut off. Then there's this shoot that's going to come up and is going to rebuild. And that's what it's looking forward to. And it's going to be a branch a righteous branch that's going to bear fruit is the image. So from there, we get this kind of idea of what this leader is going to be like. So I ask you, here's what I was trying to do, Ryan. I wasn't trying to put you in a corner, but
well, I know, but I'm just like, it's hard to articulate. Like,
yeah,
what
it is.
For me, like it's hard for me to articulate what makes a good leader.
Well, and I think I guess I was trying to say, in contrast sometimes to even what we think of as a good leader, here's what the description of this leader is going to be like. So read just the next couple of verses, and we'll talk about this.
The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. You want me to keep going?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Just the beginning of verse 3 says, "And he will delight in the fear of the Lord." And
he will delight in the fear
Usually,
of the Lord.
Yeah, the verse, it's in the middle of a verse, but sometimes we cut off the sentence there. It depends on how you interpret and translate that sentence. But here it says, "The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him." And so some of the most important characteristics of this leader are that God's Spirit is directing. And so some of the characteristics here you see is wisdom and understanding. I'll tell you, we pray, every week in our service, we pray for the leaders of our nation and state and local leaders as well. And as the pastor, what I pray for is I pray that they will have wisdom and they will lead wisely, that they will seek to do God's will. And I think that's what we want in a leader, is someone who has wisdom from God. And it talks about counsel and of might. Might here, I think, and we'll see a little bit more about this in just a minute, but might's the ability to get done what needs to be gotten done.
Right.
And that's something we do want with leaders. I said we use the term strong leader. Maybe I should have said the other thing. What? Maybe it's easier for us to describe bad leaders these days, but we would say, well, we don't want somebody who's weak, right? Who's ineffective in being able to get across what needs to be done on behalf of the people. And so, and he will have the spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. So this idea that his primary relationship here, we might say, is in relationship to God. So go ahead. Anything else you notice there before we go ahead and read the rest of this? Anything else you want to say on that?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, go ahead and read from there down through verse 5 then.
Yeah. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears. But with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist.
So how would you describe that image there? How would you describe the leader that we see here? What's kind of the key words? That...
I think it's a fair judge.
Okay.
Like he's judging with a wisdom that is beyond just like his senses. You know what I mean? Like it's what he sees and what he hears. Like there's a judgment there that has like real knowledge.
Justice can be perverted sometimes because we only see one side of the picture. We'll say sometimes, or we only hear a part of the story. That's all we can do as humans. We have this inability to
finite
know
perspective.
Right. But this is a kind of righteousness. It says, with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he'll give decisions for the poor of the earth. So this idea that justice is going to come to those who really deserve it, that his judgment, his righteous judgment, is going to come to those who have need. And at the same time, on the other hand, he will slay the wickedness with the rod of his mouth, which is an interesting phrase. You see that image even in the book of Revelation. We've talked about it a little bit. It goes back to the Psalms. We see it in the Psalms as well, this idea of a rod, and it comes from his mouth in the sense that it is his message of righteousness and judgment and justice. But the righteous, those who are deserving, let's say, will receive justice. But those who are seeking to do evil toward others are going to be done away with. And I say that's something else we want with leaders, right? We want to see justice done. We want to see righteous decisions. Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of times, it's hard to know, especially with our news media and everything, the way that stories are presented to us. It's hard to get the whole story. We don't want to see people unjustly judged, but at the same time, people who do harm to others. We hear stories or we see examples of people who are doing harm to others. That's when I was talking earlier about. We see this world and we recognize it's not the way that it should be. And so what the promise was here as God spoke through Isaiah is that I'm going to send a king. He's going to be from a shoot, from the root of Jesse, from the stump of Jesse. I'm going to send this king who's going to really bring the kind of righteous judgment that you want. Not going to pervert justice. Is not going to be seeking to do his good just for himself or herself, but a king that's going to be judging rightly and with justice. Right, is the idea. So that's I think the description of this leader. And so again, here's the Advent thing you were talking about. It's a time of expectation. It's not a time of completion. It's not a time where we're going, here's how everything should be. It's a time where we recognize things are not well, but God's promise is true, and therefore we continue to wait, and we continue to cry out with the saints of all ages, "How long, O Lord?" Faithful and true, until you bring justice, until you avenge the blood of the innocent, the innocent blood that's been shed. How long until you do justice? You take care of those who are harming others.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You and I have talked about. I was reading a book or listening to a book from N.T. Wright called "Broken Signposts," and it talks about like this idea of justice is this broken signpost that points us towards God. Like we all have this innate sense of justice that we want, but it's like if you ask 5 different people what is justice in a situation, you very well might get 4 or 5 different answers. You know what I mean? Like it's this perspective that we see it from, and like for there to be, it's hard for us in this perspective to see what is true justice, and that is, but we all want it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's that hard tension, I think, of what is. We know it. We have the sense of we know justice, but we don't know how justice gets really meted out the way that it needs to.
And I'll put it this way, that we also don't like it when we see injustice, right? There's a sense of things not being fair. That's just not right that they were treated that way, or that's not right that those things happened to that person. And so that sense of injustice may be acute within us as well, and we want to see things done in an appropriate, fair way. It's not fair that person ended up with this. I'm thinking back. You mentioned Wright, and one of his people he's compared to often is for his day is C.S. Lewis, and I can think about Lewis in Mere Christianity talking about the rule of the playground. It's not fair. You got a turn. Why don't I get a turn? And I gave you a piece of my orange. Why don't you give me a piece of your orange back later? That kind of thing. Right. There's a sense of fairness that we have. I think is what.
Yeah, and I think if you, I don't think there's anybody. I mean. We all have a sense of it. We all have a sense of this. Like there's, I don't think there's any human that exists that doesn't have this sense of longing of like this is an injustice or seeking justice there.
So this has been talking about this kind of ruler who's going to come. And again, when we think about peace a lot, again we've got the war in Ukraine right now, and so that's a lot of times peace. We think about the absence of conflict or the absence of war. If that war were to cease, that would be peace. So that's not a bad way to use that word. But we've talked before about how the way that God uses this word peace and the way that we find it throughout Scripture is more than that. And here's why I think we have to be careful here, because if we only think about peace as absence, we're missing, I think, really, it's almost like we need to flip it. I think we're missing what God is really wanting for us. What he created the world to be and what he created us for is peace. And I mentioned earlier this Hebrew word shalom, which is used as a greeting. This idea of peace. When people even today in Israel say hello or goodbye, it's shalom. That's the word that you use. And what you're doing is you're wishing for that person wellness. You're wishing health for them in their relationships and in their life. To have a fulfilled and full life. Is what you're asking for. So when we only think of peace as absence, I think we're missing this positive sense of what peace is. Being at peace. And you mentioned earlier this idea that especially in this time when we're so busy, it's ironic that this time where we're really needing to think about peace, and peace is, I think peace is in short supply. This kind of peace I'm talking about now. We sometimes might use the words like peace of mind or peace and quiet, to describe that. We become so busy with all the activities of this season, though. There's a school play to go to, or there's, you got to go see the Nutcracker or this concert or whatever, and people are coming over to the house, and you got to get it ready, and we've got to decorate, and we've got all these expectations that are put upon us in this period of time, that it seems like we're so busy that sometimes almost a relief, like when it's over, it's like,
Yeah.
But really, I hope, and here's what I'm kind of going toward. I hope that we can experience some of the peace that is a promise of the Advent season. Even though we recognize that things are not as they are, we have a promise that the Prince of Peace, if we look at another passage from Isaiah, is going to come and bring peace to us. So this next section. This is one that you hear referred to a lot, and I really love the images here. And so I want you to read this for us, if you would, Ryan, and I want to kind of think through what these images are here really showing us. It's verses 6 through 9 is what I'd like to have you read.
The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearlings together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand in the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Okay, so what images do you notice there?
Prey and predator.
Okay.
I mean,
right.
That they're predator and prey or lying down together. There is no bloodlust between
Okay.
between the animal, and it's
So
forth.
even natural enemies, we might say,
Yeah.
are those that we look at in the natural world that don't get along. Basically, there's this promise. There's this time coming where even the lamb and the lion are going to lie down together, and that's the image kind of we talk about with the Book of Revelation as well. What else? In any other images that strike you there?
I think the infant with the cobra's den is kind of striking to me.
It is
Like,
striking. Yeah, no
we've
pun
gone
intended.
from animals and, like that into a child and a serpent.
So,
Does this go back to our
that
episode, To Hell with the Devil?
I don't know about that, but so a child and a serpent are interesting images. You hear about it several times in Scripture, obviously. It takes us back, I think, to Eden, and really, I think that's what's being depicted here. Is this? Let me put it this way: this sense of creation as it was intended to be, as God wants it to be, and created it to be, for lack of a better term. But there's this idea of the serpent, and so there's this idea that a little child will lead them. And if you go all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, there's that little promise in the midst of the cursing section. We call it the cursing. Genesis 3 is all about, well, because you took of this, then Adam, because you ate of this tree, I told you not to eat. Then with toil, now you will have to earn your food, basically. And the earth itself is going to produce thorns and thistles, and it's an introduction of death into the world, of disease, of all of these difficult things that we've talked about before. And so here is then this promise, and I think it's not an accident. We have all these animals, and then this little child's not just another animal, right?
Right.
But I think it's this idea of a little child will lead them. So here we have this picture. Earlier we talked about the kind of ruler we want, but here is this ironic, if you will, or maybe unexpected would be a better term, image of this little child that's going to be the one who leads in this. The young child is going to lead them, it says. And I think it's giving us a picture of this unexpected Messiah that we're looking forward to. He's going to be a child, and that's what we remember during this season. It's a peaceful time. And again, I even think about Jesus' words when he said, unless you become like this little child, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. It's a different kind of kingdom, right? It's a different kind. It's not a military nationalistic kind of kingdom, but it is a kind of kingdom where a little child leads. And here's the thing. I mentioned just briefly Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, but there it says, to the serpent, I'll place enmity between the seed of the serpent. He says to the woman, between the seed of the serpent, between your seed. The serpent will strike his heel, but he will crush his head is the image that we have here. And so this idea that the cobra, the little child will put his hand in the viper's nest, and there's going to be no harm come to him, I think, is this idea that the victory over evil, over the wicked one, right, is going to be absolute in this. And so that's what we're looking forward to. So it's peace. This is what I'm trying to say. It's a big peace.
Right.
It's not only an absence of war. It is that, but it is also the sense of things being put back to the way that they were intended to be. Where creation itself, we've talked about the relationship with creation itself. Creation itself is going to be at peace. It's going to be a peaceful place, and we will be able to take part in that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, like the wolf and the lamb and the leopard and the goat. Like, even if you found yourself a vegetarian leopard and put him in a cage with a goat, like there's going to be a natural fear in that goat. Like, even though even if the leopard's been defanged and declawed or whatever, like there's still, you put them in there, there's going to be a tension, this tension that cannot, and we have this image of them being together without tension. It's not just, the leopard's not chewing on my neck, but like, it's like, I don't have any fear. There's no more fear. Like the nature of them has been, the very nature of their being has been changed. And that where there once was a tension, we've talked about peace. Sometimes it's, I think about, the conflicts or the wars that we've lost in America, or like the North Korea and South Korea. Like there's a peace, but it's conflict. What I mean? It's like
almost détente, right? It's a standoff.
It's a standoff. It's like, well, they're not actually fighting, but would we really call that peace? You know what I mean? Like and so there's the truce, but still that tension that always exists there. And so, but this is something different. This is the big piece. This is the big. This is more than not just fighting. This is
right.
The shalom.
Being
it's
together, right? Being together as a people, and that's the image we get at the end of the book of Revelation: is people from every tongue, tribe, nation, together around the throne singing praises to God together, right? It's a unity. It's the dividing wall has been broken down. That's the kind of image I think we're talking about here. So the final thing, and this isn't a big deal. It says, "We'll neither harm to destroy on my holy mountain." So this idea of the holy mountain, of course, is Mount Zion we think about, but then Isaiah uses this several times where he talks about people will stream up from all places to Mount Zion. As we've seen before, that there's going to be this image. So Mount Zion kind of stands for this whole kingdom again, the way the future, the way things are going to be when things are finally put to right, to use, since you mentioned Tom Wright, to use his language, when things are put to right, and things are turned back to the way that they were intended to be. But the final image there is interesting. It says, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord." And I think knowledge here isn't the verb know in well, you might remember the King James. Know even means in the sense to have intimate relationship with, right? Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore a son. This is the idea of knowledge of an intimacy, an intimate relationship is the way that I would put it. It's not just head knowledge here, right? But it's the idea of, the difference between when you say, have you heard of, so-and-so? Oh, yeah. You think, oh, yeah, I think, I know him. I went to school with them, and, we had a couple of classes together. Compared to, like, if they say, do you know Brian? And you go, oh, yeah, I know Brian.
I've got plenty to say about that.
I have an intimate knowledge of him. But that kind of an idea of the people that we are close to and have relationship with. So it says the whole earth is going to be full of the knowledge of the Lord. And I love this image. It's used in the book of Psalms as well. As much as the waters cover the sea. I mean, it's like it's that kind of, it's the inseparable, right? It's the waters are all over the sea.
Like the sea is water, the water covers the sea. Yeah, it's
right. So that's the way that the knowledge of the Lord will be in that time. That everyone is going to know the Lord, and of course, the interesting thing of having that kind of relationship allows us then to live. Let me put it this way, I suppose, and I wasn't really talking about peace with God, although we're going to mention here in just a minute, but having peace with God allows us to also then be at peace with ourselves, and then also at peace with one another, and then extend, as we've said before, in terms of broken relationships, even to the creation itself. So that lack of the knowledge of the Lord that came as a result of the rebellion of humanity is now in this image of the peaceable kingdom, let's call it, in this kingdom in the future. It's that image of it being restored, that the whole earth is going to be full of the knowledge of the Lord. Even creation itself is going to know the Lord. And there's not going to be these areas of rebellion in that time. Anything else you notice in that passage?
I don't think so. I think we covered that pretty well. I don't. Well done.
Well, and we'll finish this up pretty quickly, but then we have one more passage here, and then I want to read one passage out of the New Testament. But I'll read this, verses 10 and 11. We go back here to this idea of the root of Jesse, just like we began with in verse 1. It says, in that day, so in that day is always future oriented,
tense.
right? That's where we're anticipating this. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. So here we imagine this kind of an idea of a banner that is kind of a rallying point, a point to which people are being called together. And so that's the image. All the nations will come together and will be their resting place, dwelling place, like we talked about with John 14 is kind of the image here. Verse 11, in that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamath, and from the islands of the Mediterranean. So all the places where God's people have been scattered. And this is, again, Isaiah looking toward the Babylonian exile, right? He's writing before it, but he's looking forward, not looking forward to it.
This is going to be great, guys.
But he's looking into the future that this is going to happen because of the lack of the good leader, because of the lack of kings like, David and those who are ruling from the spirit of wisdom, and who are ruling justly. Because of a lack of that, they're going to be in Babylonian exile. But then there's going to be a time where all these people who've been scattered are going to be brought together again. And that's what he's in that sense, he's looking forward to that. He's looking forward to this return. So we can think of it, I think, as that idea of a time of peace for all the nations. I already mentioned this into the book of Revelation, where you have this image of all peoples together praising God. You have this idea of the tree of life there, as I've mentioned before, where John changes the language slightly. In Ezekiel, it says the tree of life is there and its leaves are for healing. But John says his leaves are for the healing of the nations. So all of this, how do you say it, bloodshed, all things you've talked about, the brokenness, the lack of quote unquote victories, and even let's say the victories themselves, right?
Right.
All of those will be healed, and there will be unity between people from all places, all different tribes and languages and tongues will be together. That's the image of heaven. The image of the age to come is not everybody that looks like me, right, and sounds like me. That's not heaven. That's something else. But
yeah.
Anyway, so you get what I'm saying. Is this is the image that he gives us. So here's what I wanted to close with. This is in Colossians chapter 1, 19 and 20, and I'll go ahead and set this up. I'm going to have you read this, Ryan, but Paul is talking about the birth of Jesus here in a way in verse 19, because he's talking about when Jesus came to earth and the way that God sent him and the way that he was to be. So go ahead and read verses 19 and 20 there for us.
Yeah. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross.
So here's that idea that it pleased God to have all of his fullness, and some translations are going to say something like divinity, or I don't know, whatever word you want to put in there, to have all of his fullness dwell in Jesus. So this is the incarnation, right? This is talking about that time where God sent his son into the world with his complete fullness. And that's what allows this relationship to be restored. And, Jesus becomes the embodiment, literally the embodiment of the divine human relationship in himself, right? He
Right.
is the one who puts this together. That's what the incarnation is about. And then it says he did this in order to reconcile all things to himself. And that's a big word. I often say that our view of what God is doing in redeeming is too small. And it's words like this in Colossians 1:19, or my other favorite passage is Peter's sermon in Acts chapter 4, where he talks about the time remains, and he will remain in heaven. Again, when we think about Advent, that Jesus will remain until the time comes for him to restore everything. And here's this idea of reconcile to himself all things. Reconciliation is a peace word, or reconcile is a peace word, right?
Right.
We might even use it in nations, where two ambassadors are brought together to a table, or two leaders or whoever, in order to try to reconcile, right?
Right.
Two sides coming together in order to settle differences is the way that we use the word. But God, it says, in Jesus, all the fullness of him, pleased him for all of his fullness to dwell in him, and through that to reconcile to himself all things. So all that brokenness is the idea of it being brought back together. And then that last part is, and he's making peace. You've got it there in front of you. I didn't open it.
By making peace through his blood shed on the cross.
So he is the one who's making this peace possible through his blood that's shed on the cross. So again, relationship with God. He is our Christ. Paul would say is our peace. Again, not an absence. It's not things being gone. Well, if I could just get rid of these screaming kids, then I could have some peace, right? But the peace is something that he's offering to us in Christ. That is in the midst of in the midst of the brokenness of this world. It's in the midst of broken relationships. And so, I guess my encouragement is that we should be people then who are, as followers of Jesus, we're called to be people who are promoting peace. And that doesn't mean, it's not like a typical, 1970s beatnik with, going, hey man, peace. But it is seeking to reconcile relationships. And like you said, it's not just, I think it's very good that you said that. It's not just, we're going to get along.
Right. There's still tension there, but we're not going to fight.
like most family Christmases, right?
Or Thanksgivings.
Just do this for mom's sake. Come on, just get along.
Yep.
But it's really being at one and understanding one another, loving one another in a full sense, wanting the best for one another. I think that's the kind of peace that we're called to be people who are promoting, wanting the best for all people.
Excellent. Yeah. I think that's really something that's a much more, if we sell peace short, it's like,
right.
it's not as special, but like it's this big piece that it's a piece that is, it's big, you know what I mean? Like, and
peace that passes understanding. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, I wish someone had written that down. It passes understanding, but like it's, that's the kind of peace we all want, and we have such a limited view of it.
I think that's right. It's about being, shalom. It's about being in rightness with ourselves. Well, first of all, with God, with ourselves, with others, and even in our environment. However we understand that, it's being right in those relationships. Yeah,
it's and you think about things that we've talked about this war in Ukraine several times, and just like what does real peace and what would it look like for them to have that shalom with each other? Like that is divine action. You know what I mean? Like what has gone on is there's justice, but then there's peace between all of that. Right. I'll bring this up. This is a story that kind of caught me today. There was a little girl that was abducted and killed recently in Texas, and a grandfather went on Facebook and made this whole thing. He was a believer, and saying, like, he was talking about his flesh. He's like, my flesh wants to give me 5 minutes with this guy in a cell, because they've caught him. He's admitted to it, and he's like, but I still hear this small voice of the Spirit saying to me, forgive. Wow. And he talks about the spirit of hate that could grow in him. You know what I mean? Like, but that is not the call that, that God is putting on him. Wow. You know what I mean? It is, and I was reading it. I don't really usually get very emotional reading stories, but like reading this grandfather's message about his little granddaughter, you know, and it's just like that is a piece that only God can get.
It's so relatable. It's hard because it's so relatable to us. You know, any of us could imagine our child or you know, someone we love being tortured and killed. I mean, that's just a horrible thought.
But, you know, God is bringing peace. You know, like God will bring reconciliation there, and God's calling all of us to be participants in that. We've talked about this many times, that we are participants. Not that we can't bring the peace that God's going to bring, but we can, you know, we can certainly reflect some of that in the peace.
We don't bring the light, but we reflect it, and that's the darkness we're talking about. You know, we see it all. You know, that you gave it a great example there. I mean, not a great example, but you know what I'm saying. It's a good application of this. But you don't have to look very far until you see all kinds of horrible things that we know are not the way that God intended the world to be or wants the world to be. And I think you're right. We're called to be ones who are proclaiming peace. You know, Jesus said peacemakers are blessed. I think he said that someplace. And you know, his disciple Peter said that he quotes the Old Testament saying we need to be people who are pursuing peace, seeking peace and pursuing it. So it's a part of our calling, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, that's a good thing for me at Advent to think about is, you know, it's easy to get caught up in the birth of Jesus, but that it's also Jesus is coming again. And just as we're preparing, as Jesus brought peace, and, you know, as we just read in Colossians about him bringing it through his bloodshed on the cross, he's bringing the peace that will heal the nations.
The consummation.
The consummation of all that. And so Advent is about us remembering the birth of Jesus and him coming, but it's also about preparing and being prepared for when he comes again. And that what he's going to do there as well. So, Brian, this is fantastic.
Good.
Really appreciate it, man.
Well, have a blessed day.
Absolutely.
I have a blessed Advent season, I guess I should say to our listeners. So.
Absolutely. All right, Brian. Thanks so much.
Uh-huh.
See you next week. Bye.